Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Professor Ming's Strategic Insights. Last week, we gave a brief introduction to Japan's new Prime Minister, Madame Sino-Takaichi. And she's considered a right-wing hardliner in the party, in the ruling party, the LDP, Liberal Democratic Party. And she's a strong advocate of tough policies in domains like diplomacy, security, or even economic issues. She proposed to have closer relations with countries with similar ideas and values, such as Taiwan and the United States, European countries, Canada, Australia, and India. She even repeated the famous saying by the late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, saying, "A contingency in Taiwan is a contingency for Japan." She's considered by Beijing a hardliner Japanese Prime Minister, and even a Prime Minister with an anti-China stance. That's why we predicted there might be clashes over Beijing and Tokyo in the future. But little did we know that the clash comes much earlier than we expected. A few days ago, actually on the 7th of November, she appeared on the Budget Committee of the House, and she was confronted with a sharp question, or perhaps I should say a biting question. Let me read out the question, word by word. She was asked, does a contingency in Taiwan constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan, which allows for Japan to exercise the right of collective self-defense? It is a sharp question, no doubt about it. And she responded by saying that Japan's consistent position has been seeking a peaceful resolution to the matter. She did not repeat what the matter was. But anyway, everybody knows what she was talking about. And she said it takes all kinds of information and intelligence to form a comprehensive judgment about what actually happened. Then she goes on to give a further explanation. She said, if Communist China deploys warships to start a maritime blockade, she did not mention Taiwan here, to start a maritime blockade, and the United States Navy come to help just to break the blockade, and the Chinese army resort to military forces to prevent the United States from intervening, then we have to be prepared for this kind of situation in advance. She went on saying, we must contemplate all kinds of worst possible scenarios. If deployment of warships and resort to military forces actually happened, then no matter what, it does constitute a surviving, threatening situation for Japan. This is serious. And in conclusion, she said that a contingency in Taiwan has developed to a very serious situation. We must contemplate on the worst possible scenarios. So that means Takaichi's statements is actually an expression of the possibility of a military intervention on the Japanese side against China. And this is something perhaps we should say unprecedented in Japanese government so-called official position. So why was she so bold? You must still remember, in late October, President Trump paid a visit to Japan, and he invited Takaichi to board the carrier, George Washington. And she even delivered an inspiring speech to the crew on the aircraft carrier. So I think it's not unreasonable to speculate that they must have reached some kind of consensus about the situation in the Asia-Pacific region, about the situation in Taiwan, and about the possible move made by the Chinese communists. And that's where the consensus lies. So as you can imagine, Beijing is really upset about what Takaichi has said. So the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing condemned Takaichi for what she said. And he accused her of interfering into China's domestic affairs, seriously violating the One China principle, and it's being completely inconsistent with the political commitments hitherto made by the Japanese government. So they issued their strongest protest against Japanese government. But there's more to it. And on the 8th, Mr. Jian, the Consul General to Osaka, Japan, issued a comment on his own X account saying, let me quote this, "If you dare to arbitrarily interfere, then we will simply and unhesitatingly chop off your filthy necks. Are you truly prepared for the consequences?" That's very threatening, that's very impolite, and that's very undiplomatic. And until 7:30 p.m., this comment could not be retrieved on X by the Japanese reporters. But they tried to contact the consulate, but they got no response. On the next day, on the 9th, Mr. Jian posted another comment on the X account, saying that statement like a contingency in Taiwan is a contingency for Japan is a path to death by some foolish Japanese politicians. So that's very provocative. And he even warned, again, I have to read it out to you. "It is imperative that you restore the most fundamental concepts of rationality and respect for the law, and absolutely do not allow the entire nation to face the same devastating catastrophe suffered at the time of defeat." That's threatening enough. And that's very, very undiplomatic for any diplomat to say something like that. Therefore, angry responses from the Japanese public it should not come as a surprise to you. We hear all kinds of angry languages from social media, saying like, this is not a personal opinion, this is the true thinking of the Chinese government, and claiming to or urging to chop off our prime minister's head is an official declaration of war, and this person in Japan poses a real threat to our national security, and things like that. And do you remember Beijing's wolf warrior diplomacy we mentioned to you before? This is one more example that testifies to it, perhaps the most recent one, of course not the last one. And again, that reinforces our impression of their brutal and jingoistic behavior toward the neighboring countries. Wolf warrior diplomacy is for one, and excessive military buildup and military exercises, how they create troubles in the South China Sea, and their support for Russia to invade Ukraine, and how they try to intimidate Taiwan with military forces, and so on and so forth. So Prime Minister Takaichi is not the cause for the trouble. Communist China is the true cause for the regional problem. But one thing that we can be sure is that the diplomatic relations between Tokyo and Beijing will be overshadowed, not by Takaichi, but by Beijing's attitude and by Beijing's behavior. But anyway, in the eyes of Beijing, as we mentioned before, they tend to see her as a prime minister with an anti-China stance. Now, one thing we know for sure is that Beijing will try to get rid of her from inside Japan. That's something that needs to be watched very closely in the future. And I think that's all I want to share with you today. I hope you liked today's program, and please share it with your friends, and please subscribe to it if you haven't done so, and please do remember to click the icon bell. And that's all for today. I'll see you next time.